Hello, Julie here and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I've got a couple of different card fronts. So I've used a die on the front of both of these cards. So I've got like a cutout look and they're a little bit different to each other. So we'll see how that progresses as we go through the video. I'm using normal scrapbooking cardstock to create the base for these cards because I want to die cut into my card base. Normally I'd use a 300 GSM cardstock for my card bases, but I'm not sure how that would go with the die cutting. For my first card, I'm going to cut a strip that is 4 1/4 inches wide by 12 inches long. I'm going to score that at the 6-inch mark on the 12-inch edge, and then have a top folding 4 1/4 by 6-inch card. Now I'm going to use this Sizzix 663630A die. It came with my Sizzix switch that my husband gave me for Christmas, and I'm going to it's two parts. One cuts the frame and one cuts the actual design. So I'm just going to use the piece that cuts the design, and I'm going to cut that into the left hand side of my card front. To hold my die in place, I'm going to use a couple of pieces of this mint tape. I wanted to put a frame around my cutout, so I cut a rectangle of cardstock, the same cardstock that I created the card base out of. I cut a piece that was 2 1/8 by 5 5/8. Now the actual frame that cuts out around the outside of that lattice piece, if you use it that way, actually measures 1 5/8 by 5 inches. So what I've done is I've made it about 1/4 inch bigger on each side, so that I'm going to have 1/4 inch frame, because what I'm going to do with this piece of paper is now take that rectangular die in position and then run it through my big shot, so that I'm going to end up with a 1/4 inch frame. It's going to fit nicely around that panel that I've cut out of the front of my card. So that's going to fit nicely around that cutout panel. But before I attach the frame, I'm going to put some foam tape behind it. I've got some really thin, I think it's about 1/8 of an inch wide foam tape that I'm going to use for this. I bought this at scrapbook.com and it's very handy. Saves you having to cut down your normal tape or your squares or whatever. Very handy size actually. So I'm just going to run that around the whole outside of my frame. Once I've got that in position, I'm then going to attach that to my card front. Time now to decide what to embellish it with. I've got a few handmade flowers that I have left over from a project that I created recently, and I trialed those, and I also had a white die cut floral embellishment that I thought I would try as well. I was going for the the white on white look, but I decided that I would go for the small spiky type flowers, 2 of those with some leaves. They have got a bit of gold on them, and I'm not too worried about that. White and gold's always quite nice, I think, and also I will bring in more gold when I put my sentiment on there. So I'm going to go ahead and use my art glitter glue to attach those embellishments to my cutout panel. Now when you're doing this, you have to be really careful that your glue doesn't go all the way and attach your front of your card to your back of your card. I actually put a dry baby wipe between my 2 layers, my top of my card and my back of the card, so that if there was any excess glue that would sort of catch it, and that seemed to work quite well. And also by looking at the back and working out exactly where my flowers were going to sit, I was able to put some glue onto the actual lattice part, and that really helped my flowers stay in place. I'm using my art glitter glue to do this, and it works perfectly. I love this glue. It holds really, really well. Now for the sentiment, I'm using a stamped and heat embossed sentiment. I've used Woodware Word Fragments stamp set for this. Now I've done this in advance. I did a whole heap of them at once, and so I've I don't have to stop what I'm doing and create a sentiment every time I make a card. And I've got a whole pile of different sentiments sort of sitting in a little container off to the side. So this one is heat embossed with gold, and I'm trimming it down so that the gold border around the sentiment is buttered right up to the edge. It says it's your day, so I'm considering that as a birthday. It's your day, it's your birthday. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some foam tape to the part of this that's going to sit off of the frame. Because that frame was risen up, I need to make sure that this sentiment can sit flat. So about 3/4 of the sentiment is going to be on foam, and the rest I'm just going to use double-sided tape and attach that to the frame, sort of over the top of the leaves. So it's in the bottom section, or say the bottom third of the card front. And as you can see straight through that panel. Now card number 2 is going to be a little different. I'm going to make this card at 5.5 inches square. So I've cut a piece of cardstock, actually the same cardstock that I used for the previous card. I cut that 5.5 by 11 and scored it at 5.5 on the long edge and then folded it. Once again, I'm using a top fold card. Now I'm using this die, and I don't know what brand it is or what name it is or anything like that. I haven't written it on the packet, so I've got no idea. I'm going to take this to my Big Shot and cut it out. Now this cuts the whole design out. It's not going to leave everything in there except the offcuts, so it's cut the whole thing out. I'm going to push all those little bits and pieces out, and then I'll come back to you. So as I said, I'm going to put some vellum behind this, and I've found some pink vellum, and I've cut that so that it is 3 3/4 by 4 3/4, and I'm going to attach that to the inside front of my card. Attaching vellum can be a bit tricky. You don't want to, because you can see through vellum, you don't want to have your adhesives really obvious. So what I'm doing to attach my vellum here is I am using a sponge, and I am dabbing the glue around the outside of the vellum. Now when this is art glitter glue, as you know, and of course when it dries clear. So I'm trying to just keep it within the confines of a very narrow border around the edges of the vellum, and I'm going to stick that down to my card front, inside the card front. Now when this is dry, you cannot see the glue at all. I have to say though that I wasn't happy with the way the inside of the card looked when I had finished it and I'd finished filming, but what I did do is I went in and created a rectangular frame to go over the edge of the vellum. This made it look a lot neater and also helped to hold that vellum in place. Now I'm going to take my die cut piece and attach that back inside of the die cut area over the top of the vellum. Now I'm going to use the same technique to adhere the die cut piece to the vellum. So I'm just using a sponge to dab all over that die cut piece. Now once again, that is just going to put a fine layer of glue on that piece, and I'm not going to end up with a mess of glue all over my vellum, which is usually what I do. So that piece of course fits nicely into the cut because it's the same piece. Okay, to embellish this card, I'm using the Couture Creations CO724161 die, and I've used the same pink vellum, and I've cut out enough layers to make 3 flowers. One flower has the 4 layers and 2 flowers have 3 layers. So I've got one flower that's slightly bigger than the other 2. I thought about shaping the petals on this, but changed my mind about it, because when I actually attached the glue into the middle of the flower, it slightly raised the petals up anyway, so I didn't really need it. So I'm just going to use my art glitter glue to assemble my 3 flowers. Now I've got a couple of uniquely creative leaf dies. One's called Little Leaves and the other one's called Mixed Leaves die. I've used that Mixed Leaves die as well with the white cardstock for my first card. So I've cut these from some green, pale green vellum, and I didn't end up using the little leaves. That's the sort of like spinal leaves, but I'm going to use an assortment of the other leaves to add to my cluster. Just something to, a little bit of a change colour without being overpowering. Once I've got my layout, I'm happy with the way things are sitting, I'm going to attach everything down with my glue. For a little bit of something extra, I'm going to use my Nuvo drops called White Blizzard and just put a little dot of that in the centre of each of those flowers. The sentiment for this one comes from the Paper Rose pack of sentiments called All Occasions. I've just cut that out and attached it to the front of my card. It's sitting flat on the card, it's not risen at all, and yeah, I love these little sentiment strips, very handy. They come in black print on white background and white print on black background, all in the same pack, and they have so many great sayings. So that's my cards for today. Two different ways to use your dies on the front of your cards. One you can actually see through, and one has got that vellum behind it to give a little bit of extra colour. I really like the one that hasn't got anything behind it, and so I actually contemplated putting some pattern paper on the inside back or inside of the card so that there was a colour showing through there, but I decided to stick with the white. But you know, coloured background might be something for the next card. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you've got some inspiration and different ways to use your dies on the front of your cards. And I hope you can join me when I post my next video. If you're not already a subscriber, I'd love it if you would subscribe to my channel. I'm getting quite anxious to get to the 2,000 mark, so that would be great. When I do get to 2,000, I plan on having a giveaway. So anyway, thanks again, and I hope you can join me for my next video. Bye.